Hi, this is Alex Behrens with Maple Leaf Coffee Roasters in Roselle. I'm here today to talk about the January 2024 Club Coffee, an Indonesian Java coffee. Check it out. So as a reminder to everyone, our Club Coffee program is a program where members of this club get access to a 12-ounce bag of a members-only coffee every month, roasted in one of three different ways based on their choice. Along with this club, you get a bunch of other information about the coffee sent out to you via email every month, a chance to choose some upcoming coffees that we have in the club, and these bags are only available to our club members. We have some availability for this club on a rotating basis. Occasionally someone will choose not to renew, and we'll have another open slot. So if you are interested in becoming part of this program, feel free to drop us a note, either via email or an Instagram or anywhere you can find our contact information, and we'll be glad to get you included for an upcoming opening slot. So this month we have a fun coffee from Indonesia. A lot of times coffees from Indonesia are a little bit on the dirtier side of things for a variety of reasons. So many coffees out of Indonesia go through a wet hull process. And this wet hull process is something that is sort of unique to Indonesia. It's a process that farmers will use to dry the coffee out faster than they might otherwise if they were just going to be waiting on time to dry some of the coffee out so that it can be removed the bean from the cherry. What the wet hull process generally does to the coffee is can either turn it into more of an earthier or dirtier flavor, or it can turn it into a richer, less acidic, less sharp flavor. So as a contrast to some coffees that we'll see out of Africa that have a sharper bite to them, some natural processed coffees that you might see from countries like Ethiopia or Burundi, these coffees generally tend to be a little bit rougher and earthier, and even the appearance can be sort of on the gritty side of things. So generally when these are roasted in most coffee roasters, big or small, you'll have to roast an Indonesian coffee, either a Sumatra or something else, kind of on the darker side of things to try to mask some of the earthier, dirtier flavors in those. And that can be kind of just part of the exotic nature of some of these coffees from Indonesia. The wet hull process is one that farmers will use as a way to get their coffee to market faster. So they'll just do that so that they can move the coffee from their farm to a place where it's to be centrally processed faster than it would take if they were just letting time take its course on the beans themselves. And it's also due to the kind of wet atmosphere and climate in Indonesia itself that causes it to be a little bit tougher for coffee to dry out. So we like these coffees for that reason. Those wet hull flavors are very signature to Indonesian coffees. It's really not easy to find other coffees that have a similar flavor, and the wet hull process is something very unique to Indonesian coffees themselves. So I'm excited to have this coffee in the club this month and to have done something different with it than just do a straight dark roast and be done, which is the way that we've done a lot of coffees that we've had from Indonesia as part of the Maple Leaf lineup before. This month with this coffee, what I decided to do was to try to roast it in a way that highlighted less of the roasting process and more of the coffee itself. If you might recall, we've talked in previous club months about some of the ways that it's possible to roast a coffee to either accentuate the roasting technique itself, or to accentuate the coffee, or maybe to do a bit of both. This month, in an effort to try to make this the characteristics of this coffee really shine through, what I decided to do was to try to push the coffee as quickly as possible through the roast process without burning it or making it sharp or bitter or anything like that. And the intention there is to make sure that we keep the characteristics of the coffee intact as much as possible, while still maybe giving a little bit of a roasty element and not completely masking some of the kind of characteristics and qualities of the wet hull process in the coffee itself. And this is possible if we just try to make the coffee move into the development phase and some other phases of the roast as quickly as possible. And that's really what I did this time. So I think each of these three roasts, the light, medium, and the dark, has something very signature going on in them that is a very easy to drink coffee that has some very interesting characteristics and has some roasty elements to it, but each of the three roasts have something very signature going on in them from the original coffee bean and the beans themselves. So I'm excited for people to experience that so that they get a chance to try a coffee from Indonesia that isn't just a dark roasted coffee that's had a lot of the characteristics and the flavor burned out of it, but something that has a lot of that still, that feel that you would get if you were tasting something that was a lighter or medium roast from any other part of the world. So starting off with the light roast, and one thing to note about each of these three roasts is that the grounds themselves have a very distinctive flavor and smell to them separate from the way that the coffee itself tastes. So we're in one of those months where the coffee flavor and the taste, or the scent and the taste will be things that won't align perfectly in the way that some other months do. Interesting notes about the light roast is that it does have more of a fruity tint to it, kind of like a strawberry, not quite tropical fruit sort of feel, so we're not talking about something that has an Ethiopian sort of feel to it, but it has more of that kind of sweetness that you would normally see out of certain parts of an African coffee, and maybe something out of maybe Colombia or Nicaragua when we've had some lighter roasts that have had a fruity characteristic to them. There's also a hint of kind of a floral citric nature to this. Both the light and the medium roasts did have a bit of a lemony, citrusy tint to them that wasn't as prominent or sharp as something that we've seen out of Guatemala or Colombia or other places in Central America. But you'll definitely have a little bit of a tiny bite to it from that kind of citrus note. And that's the grounds only. Once we move into the actual brewed coffee on the light roast side itself, this is where the Indonesian roots really shone through, and you start to see some of the earthiness that you would normally expect out of an Indonesian wet hull process coffee. There was definitely still a lot of sweetness in this coffee. Each of the three roasts have a great body to them. They're not light finishes by any means, and especially the light roast is a signature characteristic that it has a dry finish and a little bit of like a tingle on your tongue as you're swallowing. Normally when we see light roasts, if they're a sharper kind of coffee, you'll see something that has a little bit of a bitter, kind of a sharp bite to it. And this is one coffee that has a good body to it and will really fill your mouth. But then once you're done swallowing it, it'll have just a dry feel on your tongue that will almost taste like eating like maybe a really piece of dry dark chocolate. Not in the flavor itself, but what it does to your mouth after you swallow. The medium roast, on the other hand, has more of a thicker feel even than the light roast does. So this came to be more of a creamy kind of smelling coffee and tasting coffee as well. More on the chocolatey side of things. And this isn't one of those months where the medium roast has like a milk chocolate or a dark chocolate feel to it. It's sort of like a, I don't want to say bargain basement chocolate sort of feel, but you'll taste chocolate, but you won't taste a rich, sweet chocolate that you normally would. It'll be more like maybe a grab bag chocolate type of bar that, while I'm making it probably not sound super great with that description, I promise you it is sort of fun to try something that has a sweetness to it, that has that dry finish, but also has kind of a milk chocolatey kind of on the edge type of feel. Once you actually get into the brewed coffee itself on the medium roast, that kind of citrusy bite that you saw in the light roast is still there. It's going to be a little bit toned down relative to what you'd see in the light roast, but it's still going to be quite prominent. And overall, I think the medium roast was a lot sweeter, richer sweeter than the light roast was. I think both the light and the medium have a lot in common with each other. The smell of the ground and the taste of the coffee itself was very, very full-bodied without being big. So it's something that really stuck with you and kind of lingers in your mouth, but still has that dry finish, which is an interesting characteristic to try out. And you'll see a lot of characteristics in this coffee that do strike you as a conventional Indonesian coffee. So if you've ever had the Bali Blue Moon that we usually feature on the holidays, or a Sumatra coffee from us, there will be a lot of similarities in this coffee. The fun thing about both the light and the medium is that they do have a cleaner feel overall. So you're not going to be drinking a coffee that has a really rough or earthy tone, even though it has some of those characteristics in it. You will see an earthiness in both the light and the medium, but you won't be tasting just that earthy kind of tint. We have a Sumatra coffee right now that has kind of a burnt sugar, black pepper spice kind of kick to it. And it's closer to that sort of feel in terms of having a lot of character, especially for a light or medium, than it is to something that we've had before as a Sumatra that's been just roasted really dark and earthy. On the dark roast side of things, this is where we got closest to what you would normally see from an Indonesian coffee that's just a dark roasted, highlighting a roast kind of process coffee. But because of the way that it was roasted, it was still meant to create a coffee that has a lot of character for it, even as a darker roast. So on the dark roast side, there's still that fruitiness in the grounds themselves. So if you're going to take this home and you're going to grind it, you're going to put it up to your nose before you put it into whatever machine or contraption you're using to make the coffee, you're still going to get like a sweeter, a little bit of a strawberry tint to it, kind of more of a cherry edge. But once you get it into the actual coffee itself, you're going to get that bigger bodied flavor, the earthiness that you will normally see, and a little bit of a bite to it from being that earthy kind of quality that you normally expect out of a Sumatra coffee. So I think that the dark roast for me wasn't my favorite, mostly because of the way that we usually do an Indonesian coffee will be on the darker side of things. This month, I'm definitely going to recommend that people either choose the light or the medium roast options because of the kind of curious characteristics that you get and the difference that you get out of both the grounds and then the transition into the brewed form itself. So I'm really excited for people to try this coffee out this month, and I hope to catch you soon for another Club Coffee video next month. Take care.